Do you have an idea for what we should do for an episode of this show? Well, you're in luck because today's episode is actually a listener request. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. Danny, what is the topic for today and who sent it in?
So we're going to be talking about being honest with oneself, and a shout out to listener Eli. So thanks for the suggestion. This is a great topic, and I think it's one that we can do many times and do differently anyway. So I think it's a worthwhile one to pursue because he mentioned when he reached out too, like he was thinking of this in terms of like, we tend to lie to ourselves a lot, especially with respect to like our rationalizations for things, so like justifying things, not admitting when we're wrong, that kind of stuff. So I think this is a tough one that everybody deals with. And with all the talk of being like your true self, authentic, this is one of the big things we got to kind of tackle.
Live your best life,
I
tell
hate
your
that.
story. Oh my gosh, thoughts and prayers,
Wait,
man.
you know
But
why? You know
but
why I
before
think?
we get
Wait, before let me bitch a little. You know why I hate that stuff? Like all that pop, like kind of crap, is because when you read
nobody cares.
philosophy, nobody cares, A. And B, when you actually read the philosophy and care about it, all of that is such watered down nonsense. Because it's like taglines without any like, you know. And it's like there's a million
Mhm.
ways to be yourself or to live your best life. What the hell does that mean? Like,
I mean, essentially, whatever life you do live is your best life because that's the only one you
it's when
can
you're
live.
living. Yeah.
And coincidentally, it's also your worst life because it's the one that you're living. But
Or you
before we
can't
get
make
into
a
that,
judgment on it because you're an interested party.
yeah, true. How could people who are interested in submitting topics let us know about other things, questions they may have, where we could do more episodes
Oh.
on listener suggested topics?
I love listener suggested topics. Yeah, you can just drop a comment on any of our videos in YouTube. We will see it if you have a suggestion, or you can also email us. The email is in the show notes, and I think it's on probably on YouTube too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It
Either way, it's definitely
sounds
in the show
good.
notes. Yeah.
All right, cool. So yeah, this one, being honest with oneself, telling the truth. This is an interesting one because I've always wondered about this whole like truth thing. I remember reading Malcolm X biography back in the day, and he
I
like,
remember you complaining about
committed a whole
that.
bunch of violence and crazy stuff in the name of truth. And you think about what religions are doing, they're all fighting, killing each other for hundreds of thousands of years, all based in the name of their truth. But truth is kind of something that's a shade of gray, not like an absolute yes or no. And even like truths that you've had previously, they can change over time. So it's a very
It's
tenuous
difficult.
topic.
It is. Yeah. Well, I think on the one hand, I think you're right. Like, so you have groups that have their truths, right? And I think, when you see like the church and stuff do things, I think that's the impulse there is like universalization, right? If you force everybody else to believe what you believe, then you're right. And I think for the individual though, it's definitely different because there's so many shades of gray with respect to truth. Truth can change over time. It can be many different things. I think being honest with yourself, that's part of it, right? Is recognizing that your views change, your opinions change, your reasons change, right? As life changes. So part of being honest with yourself, I think, is also growing with yourself over time. If you know yourself.
The more I think about it, the more skeptical I become of things that try and recruit you, like the military,
I don't
like
like any of them.
religions, like politics. All of those are things because things that are naturally good for you, you don't need someone to recruit you for it. Like to have
Well,
really good sex, you don't need a recruiter for that. Like it's just like
well,
bam.
the other thing too is like the problem with those things too is like they want to tell you what's true. And so they take away all of your power of thinking for yourself, right? Because it's like if you join us, you have to believe all these things. And so you're conforming. What ends up happening is like, and Kierkegaard talked about this, right? The problem with like morality and living life when you're involved in one of these things like the church or something is that you're trying to conform to an external system, right? So instead of like internalizing what's right yourself and knowing your reasons for acting, you're looking at like this list of rules and you're conforming to it. And so the big question you have to ask yourself is like, well, would I be doing that if I wasn't part of this group? And then it
Hmm.
raises the question of, is that actually even right for you, right? Or is this even the right way for you to live? So yeah,
Hmm.
it's tough. I think for the individual though, it's funny because like Nietzsche said like honesty and with respect to oneself, he thought was the highest virtue.
Well, honesty is the best policy.
All right, it is the best policy. But
Yeah.
being honest with oneself is not easy either.
Well, it's
That is like,
interesting because you have to kind of figure out if you're being honest to yourself or if you're just being honest to what all that BS that was programmed into you.
well,
Because
this
there's a
is
lot
it,
of that going on.
right? You have you have social conditioning, socialization. So like before we can even think for ourselves, we've already downloaded all this stuff of, that people, for the most part, probably thinking they're doing the right thing are trying to teach you, right? Your parents, authority figures, all that crap. So by the time you start thinking for yourself, you already have to then overcome all this crap that you've already learned in order to be your own self. Some of it might be appropriate, but maybe not all of it. And figuring it out is going to be hard. And then even if you do figure that out, there's so much noise outside. Like we have so much pressure from relationships, advertising, social media, all these different groups that you can be a part of that are constantly trying to get our attention. Think of like politics and stuff, right? Everything's become very polarized. And so you see, like, I think this is the other problem. But you also see how people fail in this so much too. Like politics is such a good example, dude. Like if you're not a member of our group, you're wrong and we're all right. But it's like,
Well, this is an interesting thing about truth and honesty is that it presupposes that anything that's not your truth is false. But that's not necessarily the case. You can
well,
have a
no.
truth and everybody else can have a truth and different things can be true for different people at different times. And so there can be a whole bunch of truths and and the other thing is like this concept with being honest. I mean, I think about it. I remember we were talking a long time ago and you're like, everybody lies. And it just blew my
Yeah.
mind because I thought like, I was a Boy Scout. We were like drilled in that we're supposed to tell the
You weren't
truth.
just a Boy Scout, you
And
were an Eagle Scout.
true, exactly. So
You were in that
I
shit for a
really
long
was
time.
conditioned. Yeah, I know, exactly. And so, but like it blew my mind that like it could be acceptable for people to lie. And like I knew that people told white lies, but then I'm like, is there anything that's not essentially a lie? And I'm not sure if you could ever be completely true.
I mean, I don't think there is objective truth. I think that's a
Yeah.
falsity in the first place because everything's contrived. It's made up. It's meanings that
Hmm.
we create, right? So I think, I mean, if you take this from like I'll take the way Nietzsche talks about like being honest with yourself. It's not about truth. It's not about finding like that capital T, like objective truth. It's about finding what's true for you. Recognizing that what's true for you is probably not true for other people, nor should it be, because you should have your own reasons, right? And it's also a very flexible thing too. So being honest is not so much, at least in his case, it's not so much about like, it's about knowing yourself and realizing when things need to change, when your perspective needs to change, when your values need to change, and also recognizing the reasons you have for doing things and abiding by them, not by what everyone else is telling you, which sounds way easier said than done, also, I should note.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's yeah, being like the whole honesty thing is it's subjective. Like
Well,
I
it
don't
is.
I even like I used to I mean
Truth
like
is
I said
subjective. That's just it, though. Your subjective
back when you
truth,
told
right?
me that like people lie all the time, it kind of blew my mind. But nowadays I'm like, why even bother telling the truth? Because most people I mean, maybe they expect you to, but advertisers don't tell the truth, politicians don't tell the truth.
I actually
Whatever sex you are, the other sex doesn't ever tell the truth. So it's just like all these things, nobody tells the truth. So why even bother?
Well, I think that's one of the fundamental things we're facing right now in society is that it's like, especially in the US, like politics has become a game of conform the world to your lies. And whoever has the loudest voice wins, right? It has nothing to do with factual information or truth. And really, the only truth I think you can say is like facts, like what happened or something, or the color. It's
Hmm.
all just bending the world because they realize that meaning's flexible. And I think it's very dangerous on the one hand because it does destroy the sense of like trust that we do kind like to operate in society. We need a little bit of trust in each other, right? Like if I ask you the time on the street, I don't have to go ask 12 other people to make sure they can cross-reference. You know what I
Well,
mean?
what was really interesting is I was looking at the list of US presidents recently, and it was up until Nixon when we like trusted the president 100%.
Oh, they were
And then
awesome. Yeah.
ever since then, it's just gone down the hill. And now, geez, half the country hates the guy,
Well,
at
you know what's
least half.
interesting too,
And
though?
yeah.
If you look though, like before Nixon and stuff, reporters knew stuff about presidents. They had this like they had like a what do you call it? Like a
Hmm.
rule or something not to
Yeah.
report on stuff that was like their personal life because it was outside of the office kind of thing. So like it didn't like tarnish them. Then we
Hmm.
changed that, right? Because Nixon was doing all that shady stuff and all, and it made us like,
Hmm.
and I think that also affected it because we know more people's lives now, right, than we ever did before. Even like the,
Well, so here's an interesting thing. It's like this comes up all the time where people get discredited because of something that they did. Like they may be a great artist or writer or comedian or whatever, but they just get completely discredited because of one thing that they did, being a human being. And everybody's like, how could they do that? They're a terrible artist if they did this, or they're a terrible that if they did this. And it's like, yeah, but maybe they're not. Maybe it's just like part of being human, and you can be good at one thing and, degenerate at
well,
another thing.
that's the other problem, right? Is we're making the person out to be like that they have to be perfect in every way to be good at a thing
Mhm.
when that has nothing to do with it. And it's kind of a shame. It is. I agree with you. And don't get me wrong, there's things you can do that are heinous enough that I think, yes, those people should, we shouldn't,
Hmm.
that should change our opinion of them because they're just a terrible person. But it's just like, that's like the logical fallacy of, where you discredit an argument simply because of the person making it.
Mm.
Like, and that
Yeah.
happens all the time,
An
right?
ad
People,
hominem,
yeah,
as
that's
they
it. Thank
call
you.
it.
Couldn't think of the name
Yeah.
at the top of my head. But like that
There you
happens
go.
so much. You hear that with Trump all the time, where people that hate Trump, no matter what he says, even if he says something good, because sometimes he might say some good things. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to it, but like, right, they discredit it immediately because of the person speaking rather than looking at the argument. And I think
Hmm.
it's challenging being a person, right? And I also think too,
So,
oh, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
so I was going to say, so what was the actual topic again and the actual question again? Because I just want to
Because
make
we get
sure
off
that,
topic so
yeah.
bad,
Uh-huh.
it's out of control. I think that's a part of our charm, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's being honest with oneself.
Being
He's
honest
thinking
with
specifically of
oneself.
oneself, and he said in the email, like he was thinking specifically of like times where we, come up with rationalizations for things just to justify something that we otherwise,
Oh, this is a great thing.
Okay.
So it turns out we just justify whatever happened. So I can't cite exactly where, but in some book that I've read in the past year somewhere, they talk about these people who basically the part that connects the two pieces of the brain, the right half and the left half of the brain. Okay? Well, sometimes with like some
I
seizure
hated brain
disorders,
because none of the parts have like sensible names. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like the
exactly.
connector.
The right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, the I was gonna say optic
Meh.
chiasm, but that's definitely not it. But so anyways, there are connections between the right and the left half of the brain. And because oftentimes people who have seizures, it'll happen primarily on one side of the brain. In order to stop them from completely short-circuiting when they have a seizure, they would do a surgery where they would cut the connections between the brain halves. And they started to see some very interesting things happening
When you have
after
two
they
halves of the
did
brain
these.
just operating independently.
Exactly.
Wow.
So, like, number one, it solved the problem of the seizures because they had their brain cut in half. They could have a seizure in one half and still be able to do whatever they need to do with the other half. But then
That's
they noticed that,
insane.
like, there were certain things where people had no idea what was going on. Like, they would do tests with people where they would show them they would like flash they would give a guy a flashed picture of a naked woman and he would start smiling and the interviewer would ask him, why are you smiling? He's like, I don't know, but I'm loving this testing. I wish we could do more of it. Because his brain wasn't connected. Like he saw the picture in his brain, but he just couldn't do it. And then they
So he's
did other
responding to
things.
it. He's getting the good feelings from it, but just not consciously aware of it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Weird.
And then there was another one where they like, I think they had written down or something for the person, uh, you want a Pepsi or a Coke or something like that. And so the person's like, hey, I'm really thirsty. Can I get a Coke? And the interviewer's like, why did you ask for that? And they're like, I don't know. I think I'm just really thirsty. So, but it's because we do things and then we make up a reason for it afterwards. So this concept of being honest with yourself and having justifications for it. Basically, whatever you're going to do, most of the time you're going to justify that, or you're going to say that it was justified. We do beat ourselves up a lot, so like maybe you'll beat yourself up about it, but you will justify it, I think, quite often.
No, I think that's true, right? Because I mean, that's how we make meaning, right? We want to be intelligible to ourselves in the world. We want to make sense of the world. So when things happen, we have to put them into a context that makes sense to us. And that can be both good or bad, right? So it's like you don't get the job that you wanted and you say, well, maybe it just wasn't right for me, right? So that's a way to kind of lessen that blow. It's not the right time and to keep you motivated. Or you beat yourself up and then you can fall into depression or something, right? But the justification comes after the action itself. in order to explain the situation to yourself, right? And I think that is the challenge of honesty is like we have to also recognize that a lot of what we're doing is just trying to explain ourselves and the world to ourselves, right? And I think
Hmm.
that's a challenge because then what does being honest mean? If most of this is just kind of, and I think this is where, it gets interesting. Like, I think for like, if you look at some of the philosophers, like Nietzsche, well, a lot of the existentialists, I would say, they would probably argue that, like, it's having like a clear sense of like who you are, where you're going, your purpose, right? And doing those things that are consistent with that. So being like authentic in that respect and being honest in that respect. Like, that if you don't want to hang out with people, not, trying to placate them, but just saying no, those kind of things.
Hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
there is a certain level of honesty there that's important and healthy,
Yeah.
maybe.
And oh, and a lot like also the other thing that comes along with that is having certain boundaries because when you are honest with yourself, you have definite boundaries, and that's going to cause a lot of pain for yourself, maybe for other people as
Well, I
well,
think that's
just
part of it,
because you
right?
have those.
Is that if you're honest with yourself, you have these boundaries and you can start instead of you'll be less likely to sort of kowtow to to guilt and to peer pressure and to other people's sense of obligations that they're putting on you. You'll be
Hmm.
acting more for yourself. And I think that's a good thing. It is hard to do that. And like you said, that does cause a lot of pain and it does put you in an isolationist position to some extent, right? Because
Hmm.
people aren't going to understand why you're not responding to these things that most people would respond to.
Hmm. Well, it's like that, it's that stupid question. Would you rather be right or would you rather be kind? And it's just like, but
Rather be
it, I mean, is
myself.
it, but no, yeah, I know, right? But it like makes a point because most of the time they are mutually exclusive. Like you can either be right or you can be kind. And I don't know, me, I sometimes I try and think about this stuff in an evolutionary type of stance. Like it was probably better to be kind for a long time before being right, just because nowadays with perfectionism, I think people are more on the side of being right. But
What they think is
ba-
right. Yeah.
yeah, but back in the day, before we had a definition or a real definitive right that could be backed by science, and everybody believes in science.
Well,
Back
we
then, I
also
think it was more important for community building and being
Oh,
kind.
well, I was just gonna
Like,
say, I think that's a good point. Like, I think we face a very different world too, where like in the past, our communities were smaller. Like, I remember reading something like they were talking about these big Roman cities, and like there were like 10,000 people. Like, they had bigger ones, sure, like the capital and all, but most of them, like big cities, were not that big, and most
yeah,
people lived in like small communities. So, like, being a good neighbor, being out there would be important, right? Because you don't have a lot of people to rely on. You're dependent on these
dude,
people
life
to get
was
through.
it
Well,
was
you're
hard to
dependent, right?
survive back then, but emotionally it was definitely easier because you had generations living together. You had like I just
Well,
think
you
of
have
all the
support,
single
right?
parents
Like,
out, not
you
not even the
know,
single parents. I just think of all the parents who have like two adults and one or two children. And I'm just like, that's not even close to fair because
nope.
back in the day you had like grandparents, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, everybody to take care of the
And
kids.
they're
Now
both
you're just running
working.
yourself ragged. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
which is insane. And everything costs a fortune. Yeah. No, I agree. I
Hmm.
think that's part of it, right? Like, our independence that we have now also makes us, I think, in a position where, like, maybe it doesn't make sense to be kind as much as we used to be because there's no payoff for us. And I think it depends on the situation too. Like, like, it makes sense, like, if you're at work or something and you have a community there, right? In some cases to be kind, probably because that means it's going to be easier to interact with people that you
But
have to
also
interact
people
with.
take advantage of kindness a lot more nowadays. I'm thinking
Yes.
of like social engineering and all the scammers and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like there's literally whole industries that prey upon people's kindness. And I also think because, I've experienced this a lot this year with a few people in particular, like my neighbor, who I think that people just lacked discipline when they were younger. Like maybe their parents weren't there. Maybe they grew up in like single parent households or something like that. Maybe their parents didn't believe in discipline. But because of that, they just do whatever they want and they have they just don't care about how it affects other people. And
No.
so it, I don't know where I was going with that, but it's
Well, I think
frustrating.
this gets
And
back to the honest with yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
do you really care about other people like that?
Hmm.
Can you really be on your own? Because those are questions that are important to ask in that situation. if you're
Hmm.
acting like that. But yeah, you do see that so much now where people just are totally oblivious to the world around them and the people around them and their impacts of their actions on them. Dude,
Hmm.
you see it driving all the time. You see it in everything. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, so this is where I was going with it. Like, I was being kind to him because I thought that as a neighbor, you're supposed to be kind. And because of that, he was essentially just walking all over me. And I realized one day that I was making a mistake being too kind to him. And that I
Well, that's a
just,
good
after
realization,
that,
though.
I just started like aggressively holding my boundaries, and it's made a big difference.
I think that's a good realization, and that's being honest with yourself, right? Where like I think honestly, the initial approach, you are kind, you respect kindness, so that's the first thing you did. But then you realized like you were honest with yourself about what was really happening and adjusted appropriately to it. I think that's a good example of like being honest with yourself, right? Is realizing like, hey, I was wrong. I need to change tactics here because this isn't working with this person. But I don't think starting off kind's wrong. I think it's just that, yeah, you're right. I think
Yeah.
if you just default to that because the world tells you you'll get walked over, unfortunately,
Hmm.
because not everybody's like that. And
Yeah.
that's the hard part to deal with, though, right? Because I think a lot of people that do buy into those like norms of acting, like especially the moral ones, think that because they're right, things will work out, and that's not always the case. And it can be very hard to live in the world like that, right? And it's very
Hmm.
difficult. Yeah,
Well, this whole concept of being rewarded in the afterlife, you know.
yeah. That's the other that's the other challenge too, yeah. Being honest with
The
yourself
only
is,
reward you're having in the afterlife is you're going to be dead. That's it. Yeah.
it's funny because I think I can't help but think being honest with yourself tied to like authenticity. And it's like it's really hard to do that in practice. It is. And I think like especially like for our listener, if Eli's thinking about like, where we make justifications for things, we lie to ourselves, you're going to. And I think the challenge is like to be honest with yourself is to kind of always be sort of aware that that's a possibility. And it takes a lot of sort of self-reflection and self-knowledge, to be honest. Because it's like, I mean, I don't know. There's so many sometimes like it's like I don't even know what I actually think because there's so many external sources of information now. It's like it's hard to even piece together like where did this come from? Like, is this belief my own? Or did I pick it up somewhere and I just adopted it? Like, it's very hard to know these things. And so really getting down to it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, but the kindness to self is pretty important, I
Yeah.
believe. And especially when you're trying to determine what's right for you, because everybody else was more than willing to tell you how wrong you are.
Well, that's the other thing, right? If we're being honest with ourselves, right? We're just people. None of us are perfect. None of us are much better than anybody else, relatively speaking. So I think there is that room there too for kindness and compassion when you're being honest with yourself. I think we fail at that a lot. Like when we get berate ourselves or really negative with ourselves, we're not being honest. We're being unfair, usually, right?
Mm.
We're expecting way more from ourselves than we expect from other people, or than we would
Hmm.
expect from anyone. And I think so there are
Hmm.
cases where like that honesty can be a good safeguard too to protect us from that kind of stuff a little bit
Hmm.
if we can manage it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Being honest is really hard. Well, hopefully, oh, do you want to add to the exit?
Well, I was
You
just gonna say it just takes time and reflection
Yeah.
because in the beginning I kind of talked about it, but I just noticed all these times in my life where things that I thought I was totally right about, I've changed my mind about them, and
Oh
now I
yeah.
think I'm totally right about this new idea. So it's, for me, it's just kind of having the flexibility to be like, okay, this stuff
Well,
changes, and
that is important though, right? Because think about how often we retell our own story to ourselves of our past. Like how many times in your life have you looked back on your past actions and reinterpreted them entirely differently because you see them in a new light, right? And so that right there, like our memory's not even, valid half the time because it's flexible how we interpret it. And so
hmm.
yeah, you have to be kind of like you have to be self-reflective. You have to think a lot about it and kind of be compassionate with yourself and realize that hey, it's gonna take time. I think on the other flip side of that too is like I always think too, like all these philosophers and stuff that talk about the good life, it's a lifelong endeavor. This is not like you're gonna get it right in 30 days or 7 days and that's it, right? You're done. being honest with yourself is going to be something that takes probably your whole life to work on. So don't put too much
Hmm.
pressure on yourself, I guess.
Nope, definitely not.
Well, there you have it. If you like this episode, if you have other suggestions, please feel free to reach out. We love doing listener suggested topics because then we don't have to think of one. It's awesome, but also we then know that somebody's going to get value out of the episode. That's great. This is Existential Stoic podcast. You can check us out on YouTube wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back later this week with another episode. Until then, though, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.